Hello. There we go. Welcome, everyone. We'll get going in a couple minutes here. Feel free to go in the chat box and introduce yourself. You all, too.
Okay.
I'm gonna launch one of these polls before everyone's getting in, just to kind of see who we got here today. So as people come in, they can fill out the poll.
I love polls.
I do too. I'm just kind of wondering who's a parent here. We have a lot of parents and educators that come in. So welcome we'll get to know you better. Say hello and tell us a little more about yourself.
Very good. %. Okay.
Welcome. Come on in, welcome. We're going to get started in a minute or two, and we have a poll to get to know you a little bit better. Now, Josh, I haven't asked you if you're a parent. I know Richard is.
I am a parent. Yes.
What?
Yes.
What? So this is personal to you, running a Qustodio. Then you have beta testers at home.
That's right. That's right. My son is a bit older now, so he's been through the different phases of Qustodio, for sure.
And there's the beginning.
Now now he's off the hook. Yeah. now I just tell him, don't you think you know, are you addicted? You know?
Yes.
Maybe you can get Richard some of those licenses too. He's got a few kids.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, I have a van for a family, and yeah, if they all get their own license, then that'd be great.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one for the family will take care of it, unless your kids have families too. Maybe you hope not.
I'm not ready for that yet.
We're ready for that yet.
All right. Okay. Well, welcome to everyone who has joined on with us live. My name is Rich, and I am helping out with today's presentation. And what's exciting about this presentation is as you come in, we have a very lengthy discussion about how 2020 brought a huge increase in screen time for kids. And everyone wants to know, educators and parents, what does that screen time look like for most kids today? And so this webinar is in partnership with Qustodio Professional, and we will discuss quality time. We'll discuss, how to discuss this with children, strategies around screen time based on different ages. And something else is very exciting to come is that we are going to be handing out some prizes, some goodies, if you would, at the end. And so we would love if everybody stuck around to the end just to reward you for the time that you are spending with us. And we'll guarantee you make it worth your time. I want to go ahead and introduce who's going to be presenting today. I am excited to introduce Gary Rogers Whitehead, who is the founder and CEO of Digital Respons-Ability. And of course, this is going to be a mission-based company that you're going to find out here in a second. Now, how we are empowering schools and how we are educating tens of thousands of students, parents, educators on digital citizenship. And so we're so excited to have Carrie here with us. And also we have Josh Gable, who is the co-founder of Qustodio Professional. It's an internet safety company, and he has quite an array of background in this area, which of course he'll get into here momentarily. All right, so why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide here. Okay. So as discussed, just to get everybody going here, we're going to be talking, it's a joint conversation between one mission in mind, and that is, digital citizenship. And we play our role in this. And who's playing a role here today is Qustodio, parenting control and digital well-being software company. And then we also have Digital Respons-Ability, where we perform research, based digital citizenship, education for students, for parents, and then obviously for educators. All right, here's what you can expect as an outcome to learn or to walk away with on today's webinar. Number one, we are going to be discussing the data from Qustodio on screen time. That's exciting. Also, we're going to be covering number two, quality versus quantity screen time. I'm sure there's a difference, right? Number three, parental strategies around screens, right? You just can't make them put the screen away. And so there's some strategies that we can approach here for young children, for tweens, and also teens. And last but not least, we love your feedback for questions and answers.
Well, wonderful, Rich. I'm going to stop sharing this screen to hear a little bit more about Josh and a lot of the data and interesting trends and insights that they're finding from Qustodio. So we have a lot of surveys that we do with kids, but they're tracking things on a different level. And so we wanted to share those insights with you. So Josh is going to pull up some really interesting things and kind of take the lead to let you know what's going on.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Rich. Pleasure to be here today. It's really exciting for me to join in a webinar. As I was talking with Carrie and Rich, I'm a behind the scenes guy, so it's not that often that I get in front of the camera and actually talk to audiences. So it's exciting for me, and I'm looking forward to reading questions. So just a quick, before I start sharing the slides, just a quick brief on Qustodio. I'm actually joining you. Qustodio is a U.S. and Spanish company. I'm actually joining you from Barcelona, Spain today. So it's about 8 p.m. where I am. But what we are is we're an internet safety company founded in 2012. And what we did was we developed a software for parents to put on their kids' devices. So on their kids' Mac, on their kids' iPhone, on their kids' Android, Windows, etc. And then immediately what happens is that inappropriate content on those devices are blocked immediately. And that was back in 2012 when we started. It was actually before a lot of kids had their own cell phones. And so being a multi-platform application, we've grown over time. And Qustodio has won PC Magazine's Editor's Choice Awards. We have about 3 million users throughout the world. About half of that is in the United States. I'm actually originally from the U.S., from the Virginia area. So happy to be joining you. So Qustodio is super interesting, and I'm gonna open up some of the slides here in a second. While we do this. So in addition to doing this, parental supervision application, parental monitoring application, one of the things that we also do is we look at the data. We look at anonymized data that we have coming from kids and parents and families families that are protecting their kids online. And we started in 2019 actually doing a study because we want to know, we didn't really know if we said kids are on average on YouTube 30 minutes a day. We don't know if that's good, if that's bad, if that's changing, what it is. So we needed some points of reference to try to understand how much time kids are using what online and how that's changing over time. And so we did a first study looking at use of video apps, social media apps, gaming, and learning apps in 2019. And then in 2020, of course, what happened, right? And there were lockdowns and people at home, and things changed a lot. And that made our 2020 study even more interesting in terms of what we saw in terms of data. So I'll just cover really quickly a few of the things that we saw. This is part of our annual report, which can be downloaded online, or we can send this afterwards to you all. So I'm going to go. So what we did was we surveyed 100,000 families with kids aged 4 to 15, and I'm just going to go straight into it and tell you rather than the conclusions. And of course, what we saw was that screen time use during lockdowns, of course, increased tremendously. But everybody knows that, and the question is, how do we put some numbers on that, and what do some of the numbers look like? So this is the first slide. This is a survey in U.S., U.K., and Spain, and U.S. is in yellow, and this is about video applications. And so this is for kids that were using video applications. What was the average amount of time that they were spending online, and on which apps? So you can see here, for example, that YouTube Kids was the most popular app in 2020, and in the US it was an average of 73 minutes per day on YouTube Kids. So that's more than an hour than YouTube Kids. 71 minutes on YouTube, 48 minutes on Disney Plus, and so on and so forth. So we get some idea of what are the apps that are popular. And actually, yeah, YouTube is more popular than Netflix with kids age 4 to 15. So, and then what we see here in this graph is that for each of these countries during the January, this is the bottom left, you can see from January 2020 toward the end of the year, you can see how the average amount of time on video apps grew between March, April, May, and then began to decrease after the summer. And this tells you a little bit of the effect of the lockdown. So in this study, so in this study, you can see what's happening with the video apps, and you've got the list there. And I'll give you one more on this, which I think is super interesting, which is time of day and when kids were online watching videos. So if you look at I'd say it's the purple. I'm going to call it purple. You've got the pre-COVID, right, before the lockdowns and all that, and you can see that when kids were online watching was more or less after 3 p.m. after school, right? And then the lockdowns hit, and that's the red, and you can see that the time where kids were consuming video apps started actually first thing in the morning and lasted pretty much all day long. And now once 2020 ended, and as we move into 2021, you can see that things have normalized a bit to where they are. So those are the video applications. Let's take a quick look at social media apps. I don't know if anyone wants to ask any questions.
I just found that interesting that YouTube Kids was higher than YouTube. But how are you defining kids in your what are the ages? I'm curious.
Yeah, age 4 to 15. Kids are It's kids age 4 to 15. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So social media. So TikTok. Somebody's saying that they can't hear me too well. Just let me know. You guys can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the things that happened also during 2020 was that this was a big moment for TikTok, and TikTok moved up to actually an average of 75 minutes per day in 2020, and it was half that the previous year. So this tells you something about trends and applications that kids are using, and also the average amount of time. So I think we were looking at YouTube Kids, and folks were using that, and it was around 68 minutes. Now we're on TikTok, and we're at 87 minutes a day for the kids that are using TikTok. And you see the same trend over time, over the different months, that during the lockdowns is when there was additional use, and then things tend to normalize a bit more. Although it looks like there's a little spike in the UK towards the most recent months. And same thing, you'll see the same thing with times of day. So let me go there. We'll see that here. Pretty much you see the same story with times of day. So the red area, so this is like what day part again kids are using the app. So you see in purple that they're using it in the afternoon, in the evening, before COVID, and then the lockdowns came. So these things are to be expected. I mean, I don't think that these things are like a big surprise for anybody, but it's nice to see it in data, and then you can compare it to what happened in 2020 with 2020, 21, and 22, and moving forward. I'll move to gaming apps real quick, and then we'll finish with learning apps, and I'll turn it over back to Carrie. So gaming apps is pretty interesting as well. So this gives you an idea of what are the most popular gaming apps, and you can see that the numbers keep growing, right? The amount of time online keeps growing. So this is one of the most interesting slides. So if you look at globally, the top apps for kids, Fortnite number 1, Minecraft number 2. Oh, sorry, Fortnite number 1, Roblox number 2, Minecraft number 3, Among Us, Clash Royale, and what was this one called? What Would You, right? And which was lower amounts of minutes. But here you're at 98 minutes, and in the US you're at 100 minutes average time on. So
No,
it just makes us start to feel like there might be something going on, right?
yeah, no, that's fascinating. I know at home, Pokemon Go had a resurgence in 2020, so it's interesting to see it go back on the list there as well. So yeah, Fortnite
Yeah.
and Roblox up there, fascinating.
Yeah, and look at, if you can look here in Spain, Block Strike video game, kids played the longest in Spain. So in Spain, there's a video game that kids were averaging 220 minutes a day, right?
Well, I know from talking to a lot of the kids, they would use Fortnite as like texting. Like we're gonna go into
Yeah.
Fortnite and play and talk, and it's less about the game. It's like how they text, which is so
Sure.
some of that might be from of it as well.
Sure. And yeah, so I'll go on, and then I'll go to the last one here, which is learning apps. And of course, we're going to see that that's the most time online, right? That's what we're expecting, right? So learning apps. So we've gone up to 120 minutes online. If we look at the yellow and stuff in the US, 20 minutes average time per day on Khan Academy, 14 minutes on Kahoot, 11 minutes on Quizlet, Photomath, Duolingo. So these are some of the apps that we're seeing that are educational applications that were being used during the pandemic. So, the amount of engagement, I think, of these learning apps is probably nowhere near what the gaming apps are. So probably the two industries have something to learn from each other. Yeah, and they are learning. But so here's the data and here's the statistics, and we're happy to share everything here. And I think it will be interesting, for the next annual report to see how things are starting to move. Yeah. So thanks.
No,
That's it.
that's fascinating stuff, Josh, and I'm interested to see as well, because I know that when we've done surveys, YouTube has been at the top for a few years now, and it still reigns supreme. And I'm also curious what parents are talking about with screen time, because the world didn't end. Well, maybe it felt like it ended last year, but we had a lot more screen time for sure.
Absolutely. Yep.
Josh, what do you see as a trend? What are you watching closely when you look at this data? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually one of the things that I hope that we include moving forward is just global screen time. So not just on a particular app or segment, but just trying to understand what is the actual number. What is the average amount of time that's online. But I mean, I think what we're seeing here is that that during COVID we all felt it, we all saw it. And we wondered if things are coming back to normal and what normal is after that. So I think that this is what we're looking forward to. Me personally, I think we observed a lot of signs of digital addiction, and addiction is something that once you have it, once you become an addict or consider yourself an addict, it becomes very difficult to step away from. So I think, Carrie, you're probably better positioned to talk a little bit about that. So I'm really looking forward to what you have to say.
Yeah, well, and feel free to put your input. I love the chat. I know there's a few little internet issues, but it's not on our end. It seems like I'm hearing everything okay. So, but let us know, and Richard can help you out. So I'll share my screen in a second, Josh, and
Sure.
we'll kind of dive into some of those topics and those strategies.
How do I turn off my screen? Or do you stop? I got it. Figured it out.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, great. And I'll kind of pull that back up where we're at there. And that is interesting.
Yeah.
And I want to keep it seems like it always is changing. I was the TikTok grew and things kind of go up. Twitch grew a ton, Discord grew, the gaming grew, and we'll see what happens next, right?
Yeah. One thing that's interesting in this study is also seeing like which apps parents are blocking, as well. So you can, that's a teaser. So you can, we'll send this around afterwards, and you'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and I love your input on this, because as we talk about the screen time, it's not all created equal, right? And so we're going to discuss that first in this next section before we go into some of those parental strategies around screen time and where the kids are developmentally and what you should think about at different ages. I sometimes, yes, there's quality versus quantity, but I like to use the words consumption versus creation. So when I say consumption, I'm like talking about like the mindless scroll, the motivation behind it, like why am I here? And to be clear, I don't want to shame. Like sometimes at the end of the day, you need a break and you're tired. And I look at stupid stuff sometimes when my brain is tired and I'm just scrolling. And there's a case to be made. We need a break sometimes, right? But so consumption isn't inherently bad, but it's about how much quantity you're consuming, how much quantity of screens you're consuming versus creating. I like this quote. She's no longer with Berkman Klein. She's actually doing child development work, but I like how we can address screen time maybe on a spectrum a little bit of looking at the different ways we're consuming. And I like the quote here at the bottom is like, maybe we need to adjust as adults, our perspective on this adult normative view. What should online participation look like? So I mentioned Fortnite earlier with you, Josh, and you could use it either way, right? Like you could use it to talk with friends and socialize, or just mindlessly blow stuff up. You can Minecraft you can use to create amazing things, or just randomly watch Minecraft speedrun videos on YouTube for hours. You can use sometimes the same thing multiple ways. Roblox has great creative functions, or you just play random stuff. So it depends, right? Totally. And sometimes us as adults, if we're not in the space, maybe we've seen some media like there is not a day that goes by that there's a TikTok media article out there about what's happening with TikTok. And so our adult brain is like, oh, it's TikTok again. But we're not always in the space, and we're making judgments from the outside a little bit. So people were lonely and TikTok was popular, right? So as we talk about spectrum, I had kind of this graphic made of like looking at this concept. So when we're consuming, these are some examples, like we're scrolling, we're doing things in a very isolated manner by playing a game by yourself. We're just kind of more passive when we're on kind of the part of the spectrum. But there's a lot of this prosumers, and that's something that we're doing both. Like I'm playing Minecraft, but I'm also creating on Minecraft, and I'm doing both at the same time. So prosumers is kind of a word that was used by the Berkman Klein Institute so I'm reading a post, but I'm also liking or commenting on it. I'm producing and I'm consuming content. And we kind of live in that middle space a lot. And I think that's where that nuance is around screen time is where are we on the spectrum? And of course, the gold standard, what we want to encourage in young people, what helps them prepare for 21st century skills is the creating content. But does take a little more cognitive energy, and sometimes at the end of the day, you can't do it. But those are some examples, and I'd love to hear from you and Josh and Richard if you want to chime in and on the chat boxes. What are some examples? Consumer, prosumer, or creator. I'm going to go back to the slide there so you can see those examples here, but I want to hear, what do you think? What are some examples you have? Anything you can think of, Josh or Richard?
Writing a blog post or working on a presentation. I actually have a family friend whose daughter made a big PowerPoint presentation to explain why she should have a cell phone when she was like 11 years old, right? So, and I think there are a lot of kids also who are getting into. Everybody knows someone, right? They know. It's probably in your even family where you have kids who are filming videos, who are making, who are creating videos and creating content. We're doing tech reviews online. I mean, look at Marquez Brownlee, who started doing tech reviews when he was 15 years old, and now he's one of the most famous tech reviewers of all time. So
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a great example. Did you have any, Richard, or maybe something one of your kids do? And if anyone else wants to share their thoughts.
Yeah, I see transformation from, say, watching Twitch users or streamers, as we call it, to participating, in that streaming content by commenting, to now they themselves are streaming on webcam, holding conversations, grabbing a bite to eat at the same time while texting their friends at school about homework. It's hyper interaction, which makes them very skillful in the use of creating content, consuming the content. Um, but it's interesting to see where this goes.
Yes, and I like your point there. Sometimes we start with consuming and then we move into prosuming and then we move into creation, because you need to be familiar with the space and the etiquette and the culture and the digital literacy piece before you can actually create the content there. So we move over there from watching a Twitch stream to commenting on a Twitch stream to creating a Twitch stream. So prosuming there. And so, yeah, and Joyce is mentioning prosumer. I like the word too. On social media, we can do more than scroll. We can read and post and create. So if you have examples of how you're a creator or a prosumer, but as like adults and educators, this is maybe we should maybe address our kids' screen time with a little more nuance, and sometimes that's lacking a little bit when we talk about it's like either or, right? But it's a spectrum. So when we're gonna kind of segue over here, but I want to see if you had anything else to add, Josh, on that before we go into some very specific strategies for screens as children age.
Sure,
What are
go
your
for
thoughts?
it. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, screen time should shift. I mean, we change, our bodies change, our brains change. We have to change our updates on screen time. But if we're going in that quote unquote adult normative view of screen time, if we have strong feelings because every day we're reading another article about something or other, we're probably not going to address this with the nuance or understanding that kids need different rules at different ages. So when Digital Respons-Ability goes out and talks about this, we'll break it up into developmental ages. So that's what I'm going to do here. The 3 M's of digital parenting: model, manage, and monitor. So let's start with monitoring. At the young, modeling. My gosh, I need to change that word right there. Modeling. There. So this is kind of the only age where we're having some more definite research behind screens, and where I'm stricter about screens too. So I used to be a librarian, and I ran story times for babies, toddlers, and preschool ages, and I would teach parents how to like read to your kid and how to talk and interact with your kid. And through a lot of that early literacy work, you understand that kids, even newborns, I would tell parents, I want you to read a book to your newborn. And they're like, what do you they just sleep and poop. Why am I reading it to them? But they're still absorbing, and they're modeling, and they're watching, and they're learning, because those infant ages, they can focus their eyes on things. They understand the voices of their caregivers. They get more than you think. So yes, read to newborns. And we need to think about that modeling with technology too. You might not think they're quite grasping it, but they are. So the American Pediatric Association says no screen time under 18 months. And that's because they're learning that language, they're bonding with their caregivers, they're learning those social skills, and they can't differentiate between the real and the digital very well. So they used to have a stricter rule. It was like 2 years and under, but they kind of relaxed it a little bit in terms of interactive touch screens and limited live video chats at that age. Now preschoolers, the APA says quality educational TV. I'm looking at you, Paw Patrol. I would not put that in that category. Maybe something like a Sesame Street is a little bit better there. And that apps needing to be interactive. So like YouTube Kids, and my kids use YouTube Kids, it's not the most interactive thing. You just click on the button or you swipe. When interactive, it's like drawing, clicking the sounds, movement, activities. Not swiping isn't interactive enough for it there. And then the American Pediatrics, they're like, well, we're out. 6+, you're kind of a little more on your own. There isn't as many guidelines when the kids gets a little bit older around terms, except things like sleep and limiting screen time on mobile devices, because that is more isolating. You're not interacting. You're behind your own screen, and they need that interaction. So what have any of you seen, like on the young kids, and people can add in the chat box on how we can model this at young ages? Yeah, but remember when they're infants?
I think this is super interesting, actually, Carrie. I was looking forward to hearing you talk about modeling behaviors, actually. So I think this would be great.
Yeah, so I am pretty like nuanced on a lot of this, right? Because there is nuance in it, but I'm not very nuanced when it comes to the younger kids, because there is more research behind that, and part of it is just how kids learn. This was from a longitudinal study that with 2-year-olds, they just don't learn the same way through digital media. That's just not how our brains are set up. We make eye contact. What's fascinating when you look at like little books for infants is you're supposed to read them this far away from their faces, because they're still making those connections, and their eyes focus on certain things. They're looking for faces, and they're not learning the same way through those screens, and they perform worse on a lot of those social development tasks when they have more of that screen. It's not how our brains work, and it's partly because this term called transfer deficit. They just can't transfer what they learn here to real life. They struggle. It takes until about age 3 that we can start doing that. So if you're like the baby Einstein and all those videos, not the best stuff. I remember all those craze, like, let's just put our infants in front of the TV and have them learn Spanish. That didn't work. It doesn't work. And it's also not good for things like social development. It can be very harmful for them, because they just can't take that and transfer it elsewhere. So that's limiting screens below three is something that we can look at, but then they start getting a little older and we have to shift a bit there. So thoughts, comments before I kind of move on to the next
Carrie,
stage?
I mean, in terms of modeling, what does it mean as a parent? Are you talking about sort of what a parent needs to model for these younger kids, or is it just about,
modeling that screen time for you as an adult, because they're watching you, and they're also watching your face. So especially infants, they look at the face and they turn their heads towards the tone. And if this is in the front of your face, they're not quite getting that language and social development as well. I also recommend to parents not keeping a lot of screens or TV running in the background all the time, because they're struggling to differentiate some of that. That makes sense. So they need to hear your voice, have that tactile experience to really develop that learning, and this gets in the way a lot for that. So modeling that, and they're going to reach and they're going to want to touch what you want to touch. I know my kid loved my car keys, just was always because my car keys were like jangly and I had them in my hand all the time. And you don't want them to constantly reach for your phone. What is that saying? They're just like, oh, that's important, so I must have it. Modeling that type of behavior too. And we don't necessarily explicitly do that, but there's an implicit modeling too. All right, points there. So a little more clear cut at this age, but then they start getting a little older, and so we talk about managing. This is where some of the specific rules go out the window a little bit, because they're growing and they're more, they need more screens for their own social development, and they have homework and they have all of this other kind of stuff. So my kid turns 10 today. We're in the tween age, and the rules are shifting as he's gone to be a tween. There feels kind of weird. Double digits. I'm like, well, son, you're going to be double digits for a long time. Today, so because there is a lot going on at these ages. So the first phones are coming up. The first social media accounts. You have puberty. That's a lot of hormonal changes. They're gathering muscle, they're growing taller, they're having more sweat and oil and getting stinkier at this age too. And they're kind of developing those identities and agencies more outside their characters, which is normal, but sometimes as a parent, you get a little more rejection. You ever feel that way with the tweens? I remind myself this is normal because you're kind of number one for a while, and then now you're like number 8 or something, with their peers. So this is where managing some of that content on screens is more important because they are so influenced by their peers, and as we know, your peers don't always make the best decisions. I mean, look at any TikTok trend. Oh, look, that looks cool. Everyone's doing it. I should do it too. Not really. Let's stack milk crates or eat cinnamon or whatever. They are much more susceptible to doing that at these ages than other ages. So managing and understanding what's going on and talking to them about it, but not in like a shaming way because their peers are so important that it's like keeping those open lines of discussions. Don't go in attack mode or they're going to roll your eyes and be like, you don't even know anything, Mom. They're my best friend. Kind of aiming it that way there. So you have a tween, don't you, Josh?
Actually, he's older now, but
a little older.
I was thinking about a story that really dates me, like 1985, the movie Back to the Future, where Marty McFly grabs onto cars with and rides behind cars on his skateboard in order to get from place to place. So I was thinking about this crazy skateboarding accident that I had trying to copy that behavior. So we're not talking. That's not digital, but definitely.
No, but the motivation is there. They want to be like their peers.
Yeah.
They follow the trends.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Yes. Do you have a story, Richard, or thoughts on that?
Precisely. My jumping off of tall buildings after watching others, just and the outcome and ending never is the same, right? And just a good hard lesson for us as we're growing up. But yes, I can relate.
That's a good way to put it. The outcome is never quite the same there. So yeah, it can be a tough age because you have a lot. It's not just their influences from right around them or the people at the lunch table. Their influences are broader because the internet has connected them to so many peers their age, and so now they can see things from further away. So when I talk about this, I mean I'm not giving specifics because they're growing, they're unique. They do need screens because that social development is important. It's important in them to break away a little bit and start establishing their own identity. So you want to really have that trust between the caregivers and children. Sleep and hygiene is really important. This is when they're going to start shifting their sleep and wake times. I'm waiting for that day because 6:15 on the dot every day my kid's up. But it'll eventually start shifting their sleep, and hygiene is also important as they're growing and they're sweating and their bodies are changing too. So really encouraging that and making sure sleep happens even with technology. Like that should be really a high priority at any age, but particularly this age, making sure they have their routines, because yes, there's those priorities and peers and they want to have out fun and jump off buildings and eat Tide Pods or whatever it is they're doing, but they got to do their homework and their routines first. Safety is one. That's where that managing component is. If they do have social media accounts, you know who their friends are, you know some of their passwords, you are more involved in this as they're getting out there. And that friendship, those healthy peer relationships, and having some discussions about, like, if your friends are telling you to do this thing all the time, is that a true friend? What does that mean to be a friend? What is, like, why do you feel you need to do this for your friends? And these are some conversations to be had there. Looks like we have some fun terms here of people doing things at the tween age there too, and some epic fails. It's okay to have some epic fails during this stage. Oh, priorities. And then when I talk about some rules, and when I say rules, like, there can be some flexibility with family. It depends on your kid, is knowing those passwords, being really careful with online purchases, because if they're playing like a Fortnite or a Roblox, they want the Robux, they want to have the skins, they want to have the skins that everyone else does, they want to have the cool gear. So really being careful about some of those online purchases. They're still learning about, buying and selling. They don't have the same concepts of money. And some other suggestions that this is when you start talking more and more. Well, you start talking at a younger age, but even more of, like, no sharing that personal information. They're going to be interacting with more people online than ever before, and really making sure that they're not saying and giving like personal, your address, or all of this information at that young age. Do you have any suggestions, Josh, that you would add on this age? And if anyone else has some thoughts too. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, this kind of coincides with one of the quotes in our study by Georgie Powell, which is, kids are digital natives, not digital experts. Parents need to educate and talk to their kids about the many risks related to social media and life online, just as they would about dangers in real life. So, I think the main thing is just there's so much talking that needs to happen on a daily basis. There's so many topics to cover, right? And with the digital piece, there's a list of topics. So it's almost like it's almost like you need a guide of some things to talk about. But certainly it's a daily. I guess anyone that's a parent knows, right, that you've got to invest daily time, because there are lots of changes that happen from day to day.
That's true. We have some downloadables on our website for free, which is like some conversation starters. I find that with those conversations, and you're right, Josh, I have to. I do it a lot when like we're engaged in something else, like we're playing a game together, or we're in a car somewhere, or because sometimes they shy away if you come at it too head on, too straight. And we have the best conversations when we're doing an activity together, rather than like this, come to the principal's office and I'm going to discuss this with you. So especially, looking at the time and place that you're doing this is great too. But keep talking and that safety piece, because they might consider these people friends because they're playing Fortnite with them all the time. But are they friends? Who are they? And differentiating who are our friends is important too.
And asking those questions, like, how do you know the people that you're talking to are your friends or not your friend? And asking these challenging questions, I think is something that probably a lot of us need practice with, or at least on my side. It's certainly like things that I read about. I'm always looking up, like, what are good ways, what are good questions to ask to kids. Now, so this is, it's a challenge, right? And everyone can say talk to your kids, but having some guidelines, I think, are really helpful.
Yeah. So we'll have some downloadables, but try to, make it casual as possible sometimes, and always go in carefully about their friends, because they get protective of their friends, which is normal, right? We all get protective, but at this age, developmentally, their friends are just so important that you have to be careful there. So great. Sure. Now we're getting a little older. The screen time for teens, and this is why I use the word no's to yeses. And this is hard. If parents haven't kind of gradually opened up the door, then they're going to be like, boom. Well, you can't just go to no to yes. It's you need a little something of steps in between. So monitoring and kind of stepping back a little bit more, and then actively encouraging where they're at is important for screen time, because they're establishing their digital identities, they're applying for jobs, they are looking at colleges and careers and all sorts of things, and they're getting into their first serious romantic relationships too. And so having some conversations about screen time in terms of dating relationships is something that I recommend for young people too, because what does that look like? How often am I supposed to text? Am I supposed to say goodnight? How late can we be up? If my boyfriend or girlfriend is asking for this, how do I say no? Is that normal that they're asking for this? Is it not normal? So as they're getting into these relationships at the same age that they're also more new into the technology, and there's no rules necessarily on this. And what is a healthy relationship? Technology has enabled it so people can have there can be a lot of toxicity and abusive behavior. You are more connected to that other person all the time. And if they don't know how to create those boundaries or say no, or even know that a boyfriend shouldn't be texting you every day through class, that's not healthy, that's controlling behavior. They have to learn some of that in that healthy relationships. I cringe a little bit thinking about some of my dating relationships during this time, because sometimes as a young person, you think, oh, they're constantly contacting and calling and wanting me, that means they love me more. that's not necessarily the case. And texting and phones make it more and more easier to have those. So having conversations about what that relationship looks like, what is healthy versus not so healthy is important too. And sometimes we don't do that until it's there, and then all of a sudden they're dating and they're figuring it out and something happens. The average age of sextortion is around age 15. That's when they get the pressure for some like images or nudes or whatever it is. So if we're not having the conversation before that and just assuming that they're going to watch a lot of TV, follow things on TikTok, and automatically know what a healthy relationship looks like, 40-year-olds don't know what healthy relationships look like. 60-year-olds don't. Why would 15-year-olds do? So that's something I would encourage too. What do you see, and what are your thoughts, Josh, on like what to talk about?
Yeah, it's totally agree, right? So it's about asking the child how they see things. How do you see things? And one of the things that, I mean, again, this is all personal, right? Because I think every parent goes about their relationship with their kid in their own way, right? And so it's just a personal opinion, but I think one of the things that's important for me is trying to gauge the happiness of my son, just so trying to understand, like, who is he hanging out with, and then what is his mood like when he's with X, Y, when he talks to A, B, C, or D, and kind of catalog that. And then when he's happiest, try to figure out, like, who has he been talking with, and then try to, hey, you seemed like really happy when you were talking to XYZ. What's the story? So I mean, these are just some of the strategies that
I mean, you're monitoring. You're like looking at the weather. You're kind of seeing what's happening, because sometimes they're not going to talk about everything to you, and that's normal too, because they do need their own identity and their own space, and you don't want to necessarily be caught flat-footed there. So like the tweens, some priorities are like those relationships. I mentioned that earlier, is talking about relationships. There's some great quizzes. There's some through like Planned Parenthood of like healthy relationships and dating and things like that you can actually take a quiz. Is this healthy? Because they might not know that I would encourage, of course, sleep, just like the tween ages, but having them kind of shift to creation. We're going to move a little less from consumption to creation, because look, their employers are going to Google them. The college advisors are going to Google them. They're going to be looked at. And that's when you can kind of create more of those digital portfolios or identities or whatever you want to call it at that age too. And kind of giving in, like you said, monitoring their moods, and then being a little less judgy about it, because in a few years they're going to be on your own, and the more you judge, the less they're going to tell you. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Josh, because there's some red flag behaviors that you can look into, and these are similar behaviors for like other red flag, suicide ideation, depression. There's some similarities between this list and others as well. I added some things around online usage, being very secretive, hiding the phone all the time, not letting you know what's going on, not wanting to talk about. That's a red flag for anything. If they don't want to talk about one specific person, that's a red flag too, the secretiveness. Wanting to access credit cards or money, what's going on, abandonment of their friends. This can often happen if there is an unhealthy dating relationship, as all the other friends go out the window. It's just one person, and that's a red flag as well. And then just increased media consumption, because that can be a symptom of depression or anxiety, that they're just in consumption mode. They're not doing their hobbies. They're not doing the activities that they're doing, because that's easy, right? It's easy to just consume, but it doesn't make us happier, right? The red flag behaviors, that's that monitoring piece that we can kind of step back and look at there. And so I'm going to switch over to you, Josh, as we're going to wrap up. We're going to have a few time for questions at the end, though. I don't want to end on a grim note, but there's things that we have to watch through. It's a big responsibility for parents. Oh, if you want to tell more about what you do, and we're going to have our giveaways.
First, Joyce told me the same thing happened with Back to the Future with her brother. I read that in the chat. I was like, that makes me feel a little bit better.
A little bit better.
So I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're an internet safety company. We have a software that parents can install on kids' devices to monitor what they're doing, and it's not a super detailed thing with screenshots of what they're doing. It's more of a general thing, like which are the apps are they using, when are they online, how much time are they online, what are the main websites that they're visiting, and is it me? There's a okay, and yeah, and and then parents. So basically, parents install this software. For young kids, it's particularly effective because inappropriate content is blocked. You don't really have to configure anything, so you can't access porn sites, gambling sites, and those things. And then as a parent, you get some reports, so you don't have to do anything. I mean, you don't have to lock things down or block things or set screen time limits or block apps if you don't want. You can just monitor, and it gives you some perspective on what's happening. Gives you their daily reports. So this is the software, and what we're going to do is for everyone that's here in the webinar today, we're going to send you a free 3-month license of Qustodio. It will allow you to install the application on up to 5 devices, and those devices can be any device you want. So if we're totally cross-platform, so if your kid's got a Chromebook and an iPhone, it will work on both, and you get all the data aggregated into one report. And you might also consider monitoring yourself with Qustodio, right? Because it gives you an opportunity to see what you're doing and take a picture of what you're up to. So this is what we have, and we'll be delighted to share that, and of course the study.
Oh, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned that. If we're going to model healthy behavior, we need to be doing it ourselves, right? So it's good to have to look inside yourself and see your behavior there.
Internet is a super difficult challenge, right? It's always on. It's 24 hours a day, and it's an all-you-can-eat free buffet. And so
we can consume a lot.
It's difficult, I mean, and look at us as adults, and we do our work online all the time. We do most of our interaction online. So it is a challenge, and I think it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge for kids, and as parents, I don't think we want to get into fights with kids with rules and those types of things. That's why I think a lot of times monitoring is good, but then you do the job as the parent. When time's up and you say, hey, now it's time to turn the device off. I mean, there's certain things that you can do with our application depending on what age your child is and what you want to do as a parent. You have these tools available to you, but it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's up to the parents, right? They have to be, proactive and be involved, and it can be a tool in the tool belt. So, and to really understand down to the data what's going on. So, I was going to give away a copy as well of my book that just came out last month, where I dive into the 3 M's. So, last month I did a webinar kind of telling personal stories and how this came about, and I have a lot of personal stories in the book of going through these different ages. I did get all stories about my kid have been cleared and I asked permission there, but I know that I certainly made some mistakes along the way. It's not easy. This is tough stuff. Things are constantly changing. 2020 brought some apps and screen time. 2021 will bring others. It'll continue evolving, just like kids continue to evolve and grow. Not easy stuff. So we just have a few more minutes here, and we'd love to hear, AMA, ask Josh anything, or ask me anything, or share some of your thoughts on something that's come up, and please as well keep in touch with us. So anything you want to add, and anything you want to add as extra, Richard, or thoughts that you have.
I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. I think I would have came out a better student myself if I had Qustodio back then. Just monitoring, how I'm engaging in this content from whatever, age to now. that's some very valuable and valuable data.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Have you done it on yourself, Josh? Do you use it on?
Yeah, actually, I monitor my I monitor my computer there, so it's pretty eye-opening, I would say, for sure.
Could I ask any insights you found for you?
You know, for me, it's
consume?
it's about time, and that's why I said it's it's a problem. Screen time is a problem for adults, maybe even more so. I mean, kids are very conscious, right? Kids want to. Well, I've talked to a lot of young kids, and they want to do things right. You know, they want to keep their digital health in check. They want to be healthy people. There's a lot of, I think, kids are there, but with adults, it's like it's very complex. Because there's no one to tell you to turn it off. There's no one to tell you what's right or or what's not right. So I think this is complexity. And then we always want to be more productive as adults. So we think like, well, I'll just stay on a little bit longer, and I'll just, get online and just do this. And then you end up in some rabbit hole in Instagram or YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. Honestly, I think it's a huge challenge, I think, for our society, trying to keep these things in balance, and then knowing when and how to disconnect, and then how to make ourselves disconnect. One last thing, that when the power when the power goes out, right? Every once in a while there's a storm and the power goes out or the internet goes out, and this happens every once in a while. It happens in our office. It probably happens, where you all are. And nowadays, when that happens, there's just a moment of, like, thank you for a couple of minutes.
Yeah. It's like we need
that's out of our control. So that just
we
tells
need
you
it.
how out of control we are. Like, we need someone to come and turn it off for us for a little while, just so we can feel better.
Because there's a culture of productivity, like you're saying, there's a pressure,
Yeah.
and sometimes we confuse consumption with productivity, but we're not actually being more productive. I like, Joyce, what you said about monitoring emails. Sometimes it feels better what we're doing, but we're actually like multitasking and spreading our cognitive energy thin too.
Yeah.
And
Well, the
Sharon
more
mentioned
emails you send, the
text.
more responses you get, right? So also, so that means
Yeah.
the more things you have to do.
We're not spending time like actually thinking, how should I do this better, or how should I limit this, rather than I'm going to respond to just everything and then making more work. So great. Yeah. And the text too. Texts take me a little bit longer as well. And I've had those conversations too, Josh, during the pandemic, talking to friends saying, I felt like it took a pandemic for people in my workplace to respect my boundaries. It took a pandemic for that to happen. Because everything kind of blurred, and sometimes things are still blurry with remote work, but I felt like finally there was a little more of like, we know everybody's got a lot of stuff going on right now in 2020, and we're just going to back off a little bit.
Sure.
And I kind of like
if
that.
if you're a parent, you can say to your kids, devices go off at 8:30 at night, or at 8 o'clock at night. You can say that to your kids, but no one's saying that to you. So.
No one says it to you, especially not your boss. Not any of that.
I don't want to share too much personal info, but my significant other, my wife was very helpful to me in terms of screen time. Yeah, maybe that happens with. I'm reading in the chat here that So she actually comes to me and she says, I'm going to take it away from you. I'm going to take the device away from you. And then I'm like, oh, please. She's like, okay. I was like, can you give me 5 more minutes? And it's good. It's helpful. But I'm just saying, this is a challenge. And modeling, if parents are supposed to model, then being able to model is a huge challenge. So that's kind of off topic of kids, but I think it's really interesting.
No, I appreciate it, Josh. This isn't easy. We're going to send these slides out. I hope it helps some people here. Rich will send you some information following the webinar. There'll be a replay as well. We do appreciate the comments, and yes, we all need better. And it's okay not to be on the computer. It's okay not to have those devices. It's okay to model and set those good behaviors. So I appreciate all of you. I'm going to stop this recording here, and we are doing our next webinar really soon, October 5th. Richard will send out some information on conspiracy theories and how to talk to people and how to understand the media's connection and technology with conspiracy theories. So we appreciate you, Josh, joining us, and we'd love to have you back. And this is big topic, so thank you.